Trypticon, Milana Chasmata. I have been starting off these lists with the most influential bands of each decade. However, I struggle to think of any bands as influential as Black Sabbath or Meshuggah emerging in the 2010s. Metal was pretty fragmented by this time. No one singular band had a huge impact, but I will start with a few that were pretty impactful, or at least really unique compared to past decades. Trypticon is really distinct. It's almost its own style, but if I had to describe them, I would say that it is a mix of doom metal, death metal, gothic metal, and black metal. Being a project of Tom Warriors, in a way this is a continuation of Celtic Frost's work. This is especially evident on 2006's Monotheist, which is essentially a proto-Trypticon album. Here on Milana Chasmata though, this beast of a record shines as something truly special. It kicks your head in on the opening track. But by the final tune, it is consoling you. This record is rather hypnotic. Despite significant repetition on this record, it never gets old because the sound is so rich and full and completely immerses you, just like the H.R. Geiger cover art. It's creepy, dark, but also smooth and soothing. Milana Chasmata earns its length. Suicide Silence, The Black Crown. Deathcore really blew up in the 2010s, even though it really got going around 2007, and I've already covered a couple deathcore records from the aughts. But Suicide Silence is the most well-known outfit of the genre. I'm sure some were surprised that I left them out of the previous list, but I only did so because I knew I was covering them here. 2011's The Black Crown is their best in my opinion. Chunky metal to have some fun with. It's not entirely breakdowns though. This isn't just deathcore, but also a bit of alt metal as well. The most evident case of this is the track Witness the Addiction, which features Jonathan Davis of Korn.
I used to wish that I could fly, spread my wings and fly away.
The Black Crown also contains Suicide Silence's most famous hit, You Only Live Once. And I know that the whole YOLO thing was a bit cringe back then, but this track made it cool.
You only get one shot. You only get one, so just go fucking die.
Unfortunately, Mitch Lucker, the vocalist, took his lyrics a little too literally, tragically dying in a motorcycle accident shortly after this release, making this the last Suicide Silence album with him on vocals. But his legacy holds up with The Black Crown. This is still killer, years later, to Lucker stomp to. Speaking of Korn, The Path of Totality. Sometimes, 2011 doesn't feel that long ago. Then I think about the short-lived era when dubstep was all the craze, and it feels like a million years ago. At the time, I hated dubstep, but considering how boring mainstream music has gotten since, I kinda miss it. Perhaps I was a bit too harsh on it. I also hated this record when it came out. As a Korn fan, I felt it was a sellout move, but now it is in my top 3 Korn albums easily. People want to say that this is their sane anger, but I'm not having it. It's fine if it's not your cup of tea, but this is good for what it is. What is it? Metal step. A mix of metal and dubstep. It even features some dubstep artists, such as Skrillex and Excision.
Shut the fuck up, get up! Shut the fuck up, get up!
Get Up is such a great jam, and contrary to popular opinion, I believe that this record has aged rather well.
Times of the king these days, holding on to everything.
Narcissistic Cannibal is another great one.
Sometimes I hate the life I made. Everything's wrong every time.
Metal step is a genre that never really took off. I think people thought it was going to be the next nu metal and wanted nothing to do with it. But even if it's an odd novelty, I do love this record. In Solitude, the world, the flesh, the devil. It seems there are a lot of 2011 releases on this list. This record is what I call occult metal. I say what I call it because I never really hear the term used elsewhere, but occult rock is a thing, and has been combined with metal since the 80s with bands like Merciful Fate. And while I can be content just declaring King Diamond's musical endeavors as merely classic heavy metal combined with occult rock, I believe in the 2010s, this retro throwback genre deserves its own name, as it has become its own distinct style. The obvious comparison would be the band Ghost, but In Solitude is so underrated by comparison, I must mention them instead. To Her Darkness is the highlight.
And to her darkness I go.
This is a great work of this new wave of gothic metal. It is good for fans of 70s and 80s metal, or just someone looking for something a bit different in the 2010s.
Serpents are rising. Her coil shines the light.
Deaf Heaven, Sunbather. Yeah, I know, this is the Anthony Fantano tier pick, the obvious choice for hipsters in 2010s metal. That said, Sunbather was a pretty iconic record. I think that Black Gaze will be remembered as a distinctly 2010s defining style, much in the same way that Death and Roll is distinctly 90s. If the year 2013 was a record, it'd be Sunbather. But what is Black Gaze exactly? It is a mix of black metal and shoegaze, which is sort of an indie rock subgenre. As I said, hipster stuff. It creates a barrage of sound, which is intense. But then it eases up and becomes tranquil, giving your ears a break. An enjoyable listen, even if it comes off as a tad pretentious. Eluveitie, Helvetios. I know it's a sin that I neglected Slania on my 2000s list, but honestly, Eluveitie somehow outdid even that amazing effort with Helvetios. The production is utterly fantastic on this one. They are most well known for mixing Celtic folk music with metal, although I would say that they are a rung above your average folk metal band. To be honest, I'm generally not the biggest fan of folk metal. A good chunk of it is just drinking music. Which is all good fun and everything, but not something I want to listen to sober on a regular basis. Eluveitie is something else entirely though. They tell a story of a pagan people taking on an empire, and even though there is a slight depressing tone, as ultimately we know that the Romans won, there is still an uplifting message, as the spirit lives on through the stories told and passed on through generations. And this album itself, in a meta way, is one of those stories.
Our songs will live on, and will be sung by our children, and by our children's children.
Helvetios blends folk metal with melodic death metal and alternative metal, leading to a varied listen. Some tracks sound more like Amon Amarth, while others sound more like Evanescence. Then there are also some straight up Celtic folk songs as well. I have only the highest praise for this album, and I highly recommend seeing them live as well.
Together we go down with our beam.
Iced Earth, Dystopia.
I will resist till the end of time.
Now for something completely different, we have a blend of thrash metal, power metal, and prog metal. If you like the rebellious metal of Metallica and Megadeth, and don't mind that with a bit more flair and power metal cheese, this is awesome. It even has a song about V for Vendetta.
We are the resistance.
So that should give you the vibe of Dystopia. Music that hates the government like Ron Swanson.
A techno city state, a prison, nothing more.
Very prescient lyrics, great guitar work, and soaring vocals. Good stuff.
Remember the idea, not the man. Rising up from the fire.
Archspire, the Lucid Collective.
There is a better way of talking than we tickle. And there's not together this multitude of we know where the topic becomes code-reported. This is thing is circling.
Technical death metal, also known as tech death for short, was another style that was big in the 2010s. While it really started with Necrophagist back in 1999, it was pretty underground back then. Archspire has a unique sound, even among tech death bands, due to Oliver Aleron's rapid speed vocals, which blew me away when I first heard them. He takes the chopper style of rapping that rappers like Tech-9 utilize, and applies this to death metal. Whether that also makes them a rap metal band or not, I'm not sure. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is Archspire a rap metal band? Anyways, very technical musicianship too. Has a very alien quality overall. I love everything about this. So ridiculously fast and over the top. And it's another band that I'd recommend checking out live as well. Periphery 2. This time it's personal. This is a 1 in a million. It's so good that it ruins the rest of their discography for me. I just have to come back to this every time I'm reminded of Periphery. The only possible criticism I have is that it's a little long, but considering how perfect it is, I don't mind the extra length.
That's what she said!
Here we have what is called Progressive Metalcore, which I do believe is an offshoot of Gent. Yes, forgive me Periphery, it is a genre. Progressive Metalcore blends Gent, prog metal, post-hardcore, and melodic metalcore. There are some demolishers like Ragnarok, and some ambient moments as well. Plenty of Jekyll and Hyde songs like Facepalm Mute, and the ballad, Arised, is emotionally powerful. And has an epic guitar solo by John Petrucci of Dream Theater fame. Banger after banger on this. Everything about this is perfection. Easily the best progressive metalcore album. Black Tongue, The Unconquerable Dark. This is the definitive downtempo deathcore record. Basically, the slowest, heaviest deathcore ever. Makes the Black Crown sound like Nickelback by comparison. The breakdowns are so slow that they'll actually trick you into thinking the song has already ended, but then it comes back even slower. This album captures the nihilistic void that defines the era of depression. Depression was a major theme of 2010's metal, and this is the zenith of that tone. The sound of the abyss, nothing more, nothing less. Pure darkness. Marilyn Manson, the Pale Emperor.
You better watch yourself. You better watch yourself.
This is easily the most rock-oriented of the list. Marilyn Manson have always straddled the line between rock and metal, but this is quite a departure from the ear-piercing industrial metal that they released in the 90s. This is more of a gothic metal release that dabbles with blues rock and even, according to the wiki, alternative country, which surprisingly actually checks out. Funny enough, Manson even has a cowboy hat on in his YouTube thumbnail. Country and Manson might be the last two things that you'd expect combined, but it works well here. Manson goes full-on Jim Morrison with his voice on this one.
Wanna know what Sue said? The narcissist says you better watch yourself.
Fun fact, the same drummer from the Dillinger Escape Plan's Ironworks does the drumming on this too. This is a good comeback album for Marilyn Manson. Feels somewhat like a continuation from Mechanical Animals and Hollywood. It is Mephistopheles gloating after his victory over Faust.
I'm the Mephistopheles of Los Angeles.
A Legion, Form Shifter. For a change of pace, we have a mix of tech death and mellow death. I adore this perfect equilibrium of technicality and melody. This is metal perfected. The standout track is 12, Vows for the Legions. In addition to highlighting the elements that I've already mentioned, it has a part that is almost djent-like. And then the last 3 minutes are this beautiful flamenco section. It also has interesting lyrics too. It's about this criminal case in Canada where a couple who murdered several women had a huge discrepancy in their sentencing. The man was sentenced to life, whereas the woman only received 12 years, hence 12 being mentioned in the title of the song. It implores us to think about our system and how concepts like justice and equality might not play out in reality as well as they do on paper. But even if you aren't into philosophical meanderings about our justice system, the intricate guitar work is plenty interesting in and of itself and can carry this on its own. Forgotten Tomb, under Saturn Retrograde. Forgotten Tomb was in the previous list, but this record is a significant departure from the sound of Songs to Leave. This time around we once again have black metal, but also gothic metal, and most interestingly, southern metal. Bet you never thought you'd hear blackened southern metal, but here you go. That's what I love about Forgotten Tomb. They innovate while still being undoubtedly black metal. There is also a cover of the Stooges' I Wanna Be Your Dog. Which sort of brings this into black and roll territory in the vein of Satyricon. If you'd like to hear a bit of sludgy goodness in your black metal, here you go. Trap Them, Darker Handcraft. Probably the most distinct, yet unheard of subgenre that has emerged in the 2010s is Entombed Core. Entombed Core is named after the band Entombed, and the famous Swedish death metal guitar tone that they had. Entombed Core, it seems, takes the groovy death and roll sound that Entombed had on Wolverine Blues, and combines it with the anarchic presence of crust punk. Or, for the layman, Entombed Core is death metal plus hard rock plus hardcore punk. The result is something intense, yet rather catchy and fun. The title track is a mosher. And then the closing track is a lot more mellow and groovy, a record emblematic of this relatively obscure style. Machine Head, Unto the Locust. Unto the Locust is pretty much the prototype of a great metal record. Sure, many prefer the Blackening, and I've even heard Unto the Locust be called merely the B-sides of the Blackening, but I couldn't disagree more. For me, this is the better record. Not that the Blackening is bad by any means, I almost included it in the last installment, but Locust is just chef's kiss. The opening track, I Am Hell, is a perfectly constructed tune, up there with some of the material from Metallica and Opeth. Darkness Within is a fantastic ballad too.
Here in this darkness that I lay, depression heavy in its way.
This record is a perfect concoction of thrash metal, groove metal, prog metal, and melodic metalcore.
When there's heartache, last restriction cannot.
It's great. It's a shame that they never made any albums after this. Yeah, weird. They just kinda retired, never to be heard from again. Seriously though, I cannot believe this is the same band who is now doing this with their music.
White privilege and the folly of pride.
So unbelievably cringe. Now, maybe their lyrics were always kinda bad, but they've definitely gotten much worse since this. They were on the track to greatness with this record, but now they are snapping defeat out of the jaws of victory. It hurts because I like Locust a lot, just maybe listen to it in isolation.
So pray to music, build a shrine, worship in these desperate times.
Unleash the Archers, Demons of the Astro Waste.
Hear him calling out, don't be a fool, cast away this solitude.
Unleash the Archers, in my opinion, is the best thing to come out of the 80s metal revival of the early 2000s. They fuse the old with the new. Power metal meets melodic metalcore
Until the end of life, and then
with perhaps a bit of prog metal as well. I'm a big fan of Jekyll and Hyde vocals, so it's nice to hear some power metal with some screaming vocals thrown in for variety, but there's also some more conventional power metal tracks for those who don't care for the screams as much.
somehow he knows of everything I've done.
General of the Dark Army is the highlight, but Daughters of Winterstone is a rather underrated track too. The Outlander is a great ballad. This is a rather nerdy release, with songs about knights and references to Star Trek.
Computer, the position of the galactic god.
It has an epic adventurer vibe. This is my definitive soundtrack for my excursions through Boletaria. This might be my personal favorite power metal record, and another great band to see live to boot. Journey On. Hail Spirit Noir, Mayhem in Blue. There was a fair bit of experimentation going on with black metal in the 2010s. In this case, I believe there is influence from psychedelic rock. I'm not quite as much of an expert on rock genres as I am with metal ones, so feel free to affirm or correct this in the comments. I almost thought this album was surf rock influenced when I first listened to it. Perhaps this is because I'm not super familiar with the genre, or I could have just been tricked by the beach on the cover art. But let me know what you think. If regular black metal is fairly goofy already, then this fully embraces the camp. Kooky and atmospheric, strange lyrics, and a trippy adventure through the doors of perception. Emphasis on the doors. A nice change of pace for something different than the standard black metal, or even the slew of black gaze bands from the 2010s, so check it out. Vollenfire, Splinters. Now, for one of my favorite death metal albums, a grim and gloomy concoction of death metal and doom metal to be exact. It's the best of both worlds, having a raw, intense sound like old school death metal, but with much better production, while most of the record is slow and oozing with doom. Some tracks speed up the pace a bit and get into grindcore and crust punk territory. For those who like some napalm death with their Paradise Lost. Machine Supremacy, a view from the end of the world. Coming out in 2010, this barely makes the cut, and very much feels more like an early 2000s release. This one is interesting to talk about for a variety of reasons. First, it has a unique style. I would say it's power metal meets emo and chiptune. Chiptune, for those unaware, is retro video game music. This is a lot more poppy and upbeat than the vast majority of metal music. Hearing this is just so jarring considering how things turned out towards the latter half of the decade. It's just so optimistic, and is even positive about the internet itself. It's almost surreal hearing this utopian vision towards the online world, when today we are all too disillusioned about the internet. And it's only been just a decade and some change later. I can already see how this would be reacted to if it released now. This would be considered the soy jack consumer metal. Even though some of this might be a tad cringe, maybe we need a little reminder of that hope every now and then. Plus, some of this is just straight up fun. There's a song about randomly killing NPCs in a video game. And another track about snipers in Call of Duty. Which is hilarious and gives some Megadeth vibes. There's even a couple tracks about Death Note, which is obviously a plus for me. There is no land beyond this law. There is no place to go. Nowhere outside the world of light. A noteworthy record. The Agonist, Eye of Providence. I was a fan of The Agonist even prior to this release, and I was skeptical of the band replacing the vocalist. Normally, it is a death knell for a band. Yet I was pleasantly surprised by this, and at this point, I honestly prefer the Vicky era of The Agonist much more. She is a phenomenal singer.
Our wheels forever stuck in motion, disoriented human notion.
Eye of Providence blends melodic death metal, melodic metalcore, and prog metal. I might just go out on a limb and declare this my favorite album by them. The closing track, is quite a proggy bop. But there's also more standard at the gates riff-filled mellow metal tracks like Disconnect Me. And Perpetual Notion is pretty Opeth inspired. Faceless Messenger is peak Agonist. Avenged Sevenfold, The Stage. If you are surprised that I did not choose Nightmare, that is fair. It is one of my favorite records, but I already have a full video dedicated to it, so if you want my take on it, check out that video. Instead, I thought I would shine a light on The Stage, since it is such an underrated release. It's almost unfortunate this record has the Avenged Sevenfold name on it. Many of Avenged Sevenfold's fans from the 2000s were into their metalcore sound. However, The Stage isn't metalcore at all. It's simply prog metal and hard rock.
Never held a high regard for Darwin. Selection takes too long.
And at times, it is even just straight up prog rock.
As the embers rose through the Roman sky.
So, a lot of older Avenged Sevenfold fans won't like this. But on the other hand, the people that hate metalcore and associate Avenged Sevenfold with millennial scene kids won't give this album the time of day, even though it sounds more like Pink Floyd than any metalcore band.
So you think you can tell?
Add to this the fact that this was a surprise release with no advertising or hype behind it back in 2016 when it released, and you have a recipe for an underrated, overlooked album. The title track is my personal favorite, and the music video for it might just be my favorite music video of all time. So give The Stage a listen, and watch the music video for The Stage. I highly recommend it. Rings of Saturn, Lugal Cayenne. This is some crazy funny material right here. Self-described as alien core, Rings of Saturn blends tech death and deathcore. It has an extreme sound, going from ridiculous technical wankery to intense chugging breakdowns. This contrast works well and is great fun. The lyrical theme is, of course, aliens, but more specifically, aliens obliterating the human race in the most brutal way possible. It's so over the top that it fits the music quite well. My favorite track is Unsympathetic Intellect. There is also a great cover of No Pity for a Coward by Suicide Silence. This is metal that is unapologetically silly, much appreciated. Bell, Tide Caller. This might be one of the most criminally underrated on the list. I'll be honest, most of the bands I listen to are B and C tier metal bands popularity-wise. So if I shout out a nobody, it means they are actually really good. If I were to sell this band to you, it would be that they sound halfway between Candlemass and Mastodon, blending epic doom metal, prog metal, and maybe even a bit of post-metal. The vocals are a highlight for me.
With the strength of an angel.
My favorite tracks are Blackened Sun and Angel's Blood. Visually striking cover art as well. Vane, Error Zone. Error Zone brings back some of that raw 90s energy. Combining nu metal and mathcore, it sounds like a combination of Slipknot and the Dillinger Escape Plan, and brings out the aggression and chaos of both bands' earlier material. This would have been one of those game-changing records had it dropped in 1998 rather than 2018. It's a bit of an odd thing to see in the 2010s, but this stuff has seen a bit of a revival as of late. So maybe we'll hear more things like this going forward. Probably the shortest record of the list. A quick burst of rage to satisfy. Epica, the Quantum Enigma. Simone's voice is one of the best in symphonic metal.
Return to the canvas of life.
But Epica also dabbles in prog metal and death metal as well. Definitely a different beast altogether from something like Nightwish. Epica makes sure to put the metal in symphonic metal. They even released some B-sides of the Quantum Enigma in 2020, and they were great as well. Even their material that doesn't make the cut is better than a lot of bands. This is top tier.